Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode in our beautiful, spiritually uplifting series on the gates of goodness. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you and all of those who are tuning in today. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our guests. We have with us Sheikh Ilyas and Sheikh Idris. We have with us Ustad Muhammad and Ustad Abdullah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them and forgive them for their time and their energy and their sacrifice. In the last episode, we spoke about remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Qur'an and getting closer to Allah through His book. And we mentioned some of the different pragmatic ways to begin this habit if you don't already have this habit. We also spoke a little about how the Qur'an affects us in the dunya before the akhirah. And so perhaps maybe Sheikh Abdullah, you can give us a small recap, some of the things we discussed in regards to the benefits of reading the Qur'an often.
The benefits for sure is so much, for sure apart from being happy, making you super active and super satisfied with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to speak with you, read Qur'an. We also mentioned some ways or actual ways to start reading Qur'an, by memorizing Qur'an, reciting Qur'an, really knowing the actual meaning. We didn't mention the excuses actually. Some people say we have no time, I don't understand Arabic, I read but I don't understand, so no point, stuff like this. We didn't mention the excuses. You should.
Yes, subhanAllah. So actually I think we very briefly had to go through them because of time. We just spoke. Some people they say I don't have any time to read Qur'an or memorize Qur'an. So some people have this excuse of time. And the reaction or the response to that is that if you really wanted it, you would find 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. It goes back to how bad you want it.
And the mental blocks thing.
Yeah, so some people, that's true. Some people, they believe they have mental blocks. They sit down to read and they cannot focus. The problem is that they allow themselves to be distracted. So we have smartphones and technology and all of these things. It's good to deactivate or disconnect from them while you're sitting down to read Qur'an. Focus only on the Qur'an. Sit in an environment, in a room, perhaps where nobody can distract you, nothing can distract you, and give it its right. Give it its haqq the same way if it was an exam or something else, you're going to focus on that exam. And so we talked a little about this and how the Qur'an leads us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and leads us to paradise. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of Ahlul Qur'an and to make our family members and our offspring of the people of the Qur'an. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we want to move forward to a very, very beautiful and touching topic, and that is acceptance of our dua, having our dua accepted. People are always asking this question. Why is my dua not being accepted? Now some people are not asking this question vocally, they're not saying this to others. They're thinking it. And sometimes we may run into situations in life in which we make so much dua, and maybe shaitan will come to us and throw this question at us, why is the dua not being accepted? He might make us wonder, why is my supplication not being answered? And so this is something we want to talk about today, inshallah ta'ala, some of the etiquettes of dua, some of the different benefits of dua, some of the virtues of dua, some of the conditions of dua, some of the things that stop your dua from being accepted. And we'll mention some beautiful stories as well, inshallah ta'ala. Perhaps the first and most important thing is to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to remember over and over and over that dua is easy, it's an easy link to Allah, it's an easy open communication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as was reported by Al-Hakim, he told us that this is the best act of worship, the best form of worship. So he said the best form of worship is dua. This is the best form of worship. It is also the easiest form of worship. You can do it any time in any place. You can stand up and start making sincere dua. You can be on an airplane making dua. You can be at your house, on your bed, anywhere you're making dua. Standing, sitting, on your side. Right? So we can make dua anywhere and everywhere. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to remember also, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمُ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. Your Lord said in Surah Ghafir verse 60, call upon me, I will answer, I will respond to you. Allah wants us to just turn to Him. And it's not difficult. It's really not difficult. You take that first step towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you start to see the acceptance of your dua already. We also know that the dua, as we make it, it shows that Allah is concerned for us because we're asking of Him, right? And so the more dua you make, the more Allah is concerned with you. And that if we did not make dua, as one of the tabi'in said, if we did not make dua, then Allah would not want us, basically would not be concerned for us. قُلْ مَا يَعْبَأُ بِكُمْ رَبِّي لَوْلَا دُعَاءُكُمْ. Allah would not be concerned for you if you did not make dua to Him. Allah created us so that we would ask of Him, so that we would seek forgiveness, so that He would forgive us and accept what we were asking for. And so we have all of these different things related to dua. Perhaps maybe we can share some stories related to dua. Maybe Sheikh Idris, if you want to share something that you heard or something from the past, something that will motivate us to make more dua and to know that the dua will be accepted if we hold on strong to it.
Off the top of my head, I guess the only story I could remember at the moment is around the time I really began to start reading and adventuring and learning more about Islam. after accepting Islam, alhamdulillah,
Alhamdulillah.
after a while, I wanted to make Hajj. But it was very expensive for me at the time. This is in the States, in America, of course. And I didn't have the way to make it. So I used to make this dua all the time, all day, every day, and clinging to it, and believing that somehow, some way, I'll find a way to make Hajj. Alhamdulillah, I was offered the opportunity from one of my teachers, my sheikhs. He offered to join him in Hajj and a group with him, and I didn't have to pay for anything.
Subhanallah.
And alhamdulillah, it was a wonderful Hajj, not like other Hajjs, not to brag or anything, but just to show you that the blessing of dua is that when I went to Hajj, I didn't stay in a difficult area. We stayed in a villa. We had a lot of special arrangements that normally Hajj is very difficult.
Yes.
And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitated it for me through dua, even in ways that I didn't see coming.
Subhanallah.
Yeah.
That's
Actually,
one of the
I have
blessings.
another one actually.
Yeah, subhanallah.
I had a friend, he's in Australia now. He's like, he always wanted to make Hajj, perform Hajj. And he saved a lot of money, saved around I don't know exact number, but he saved the amount the certain amount of money, and then right before going kind of applying to go for Hajj this year, something happened, something like that happened. I don't know, accident or something, he had to pay that money, and wallahi he felt so bad. He was telling us this, and then he went back to his work. The next day he was so kind of touchy and bad and down on all these things. And then they told him, by the way, you as kind of in this kind of high level, you would take money in return for this, blah, 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 blah. And they gave him the same amount of money he just paid last time. And he was so happy, calling his wife, he was over the moon, as they say, and then he paid and he went there and he was so happy. And he was telling us, this is the power of dua. They have to ask it sincerely, and you have to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept it, and you have no doubt that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept it for sure, inshallah.
No, absolutely, subhanAllah. And you know what, that's funny that both of these stories are about Hajj, because there's a woman in the United States, may Allah bless her and her family. She had a very similar incident, story when she was making dua for her first Hajj. She never went Hajj before. So she was making so much dua to be able to go to Hajj, to find a means to get there. And then she had a dream that some people were coming to her on a boat, and they were all wearing white, and there was, they told her the Prophet ﷺ is with us, and they were inviting her basically, come with us. And she actually was able to make Hajj that year. And so subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitates it. All we really have to do is just turn to Allah, start taking that first step towards Allah, be very sincere, believe that the dua will be accepted. Now we also know that dua, it repels the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Imam al-Tirmidhi rahimahullah reports that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, indeed the person who doesn't ask of Allah, the person who does not make dua, Allah is angry with this person. Why is Allah angry with somebody who doesn't make dua? Because this person is abandoning the most easy, the most easy communication between you and Allah, the easiest link.
Maybe he's doing this sincerely. Maybe I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what I'm going through and stuff like this. So I don't have to ask him. He knows already. For sure he knows, but he wants you to ask him. You start go and ask him Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For sure he knows what you're doing. But he needs you
we have to
hear it from you.
We have to put in the effort.
Yes,
so dua is combined, as we mentioned, with tawakkul, it's combined with effort, right? We have to put in our steps.
Exactly.
And so dua is the first step.
Yeah, for sure, it starts with heart, for sure. But at the same time, it had to be kind of taken by an action, which is kind of going, supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sincerely and kind of.
So it's the same with iman, the same with how iman starts in the heart and then it's reflected through your actions. It requires actions.
And you act upon this kind of dua, or act upon this kind of faith you have.
Now, what about, we know that leaving dua is not, it's not good because it shows that there's deficiency in our soul. The same way we eat every day to keep our bodies nourished. If you leave dua and you leave Quran, you leave dhikrullah, now you have a deficiency in the soul. And this is an easy act of worship. So it shows us that the person who does this is actually very lazy, as the Prophet ﷺ said. So Ibn Hibban reports that the Prophet ﷺ told us that the most incapable or lazy person is the one who does not make dua. And the most stingy type of person, the one who holds back, is the one who doesn't give the salam. These are very easy things to do. You see your brother and sister and you don't say salam, and it's very easy to do. Of course, there are exceptions and circumstances, but generally speaking, we make dua as often as possible. Because dua is very easy. You can be in your bed right before you sleep, you can start making dua.
Exactly.
You can be after salah, just for a few moments, make some dua. You can be anywhere and make dua, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears your dua. And so we have the ayat, we mentioned the ayat in the very beginning of Ramadan, that are mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah in verse 185. And it's only mentioned, Ramadan is mentioned only once in the Quran, by name. And so this month is mentioned in verse 185. Right after it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and if your servants ask about me, then I am nearby. He doesn't say tell them I am nearby like he says in other responses. قُلْ. He says I am nearby, right away, to show how close he is. أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. I respond to the one who calls upon me when they call upon me. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to know that the door is always open. All we have to do is take that first step towards Allah. So it starts with the sincerity, and then with the action externally, you have to just take that first step, start making dua for the things that you really want. The more you want something, the more dua you'll make for it. This is a very general statement. Because the more we want something, the more we will start to make dua for it.
Yes.
And this is shown when we go through hardships, or when somebody's sick. Suddenly, they find the time to make dua all the time for their illness to be cured. And so subhanAllah, it reminds us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want us to be lazy with dua. Because dua is so easy. It is so easy. It is the essence of worship. It's what Islam encompasses. That we have a connection between the creation and the creator. Now let's ask this question. Some people will bring up the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ tells us that nothing can repel qadar, predestination, except dua. Nothing can repel it except dua. And this is reported by Tirmidhi. So now when we hear this hadith, what does this really refer to? What does this mean? Does it mean that if, qadar, it's going to be changing, so I don't have to make dua? So what does this mean exactly? Maybe Shaykh Ilyas, you can chime in over here.
Basically what the hadith, from what I understand, it means is that, if evil is, on its way to us, then maybe the dua that we make, it can repel it.
Yes.
So for example, if I ask Allah, oh Allah, give me, say, 1,000 junayd, and, it was written that I'm going to get knocked over when I come out of the studio, I might not get the 1,000 junayd, but that being knocked over by the car will be averted from me.
That's a good example.
That, so basically, but a lot of it comes down to the strength and the fervor in which we make that dua. It's a very important part, because the Prophet ﷺ told us, "Ud'u Allah wa antum muqinuna bil ijaba," to call on Allah, make dua to Allah, and you're certain in the response. So the stronger our dua is, then the more likely is that evil that was maybe approaching us is going to be averted.
Jazakallah khair. So on that note, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says, with this hadith we understand that there's three possibilities. So you might make dua, and your dua is so strong, like you said, it's so sincere, that it overcomes the decree. So maybe it was decree that this person would be in a car accident, وَلَيَادُ بِاللَّهِ. But then you made so much dua for something else, that dua was used as a form of a shield against this decree for you, the decree that's being brought down. And so this dua fought it, and the dua overcame it. The second possibility is that the dua was weaker, so maybe you weren't really into it. Maybe you just said it quickly. Maybe you weren't as sincere. So then when it fought the decree won, so the decree still took place. Whatever happened, happened. And the third possibility, he said, is that the dua and the decree were both equal in strength, so they canceled each other out, so that nothing happened. And so we have all of this, and somebody again might ask, why should I make dua if everything was written before we were created, 50,000 years before Lawh al-Mahfuz? Why should I make dua? The answer to that, go ahead, Shaykh Ilyas, maybe you can tell us the answer to that.
No, go ahead and I'll comment off.
So the answer to that, the response to that, is that, let's say right now you wanted something, you wanted to memorize the Qur'an. If you said, I'm just going to sit and wait because it was written for me already, it was written for you that you sat and waited and nothing happened. Or it was written that you made dua, so your dua was accepted, this is all in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, and then you got the response to your dua, the memorization of the Qur'an, for example. So it was written that you made the dua, then that thing was brought down to you. This is all written before. But as for the ability to do it or not, you have the free will. You have the option to always make dua, and it's only in your best interest. It'll only benefit you. And the kingdom of Allah never runs out. It never runs out. Tafadhal.
Yeah, it just reminded me of stories. It's not really dua, but it's qadr.
Yes.
But it's related to what we discussed. I used to teach in a madrasa in the UK, and one of the older students, he asked me, Ustad, why do we live life if Allah already knows who's going to enter paradise and hellfire, etc.? So I just said to him, no, you're going to stay behind. You're in detention. He says, why? I said, because I know that you're going to start talking. Yeah. He got upset, and then later on in the class, he actually did start talking. He actually did start talking. So I said, all right, you're going to stay behind. And when, after the class, I said to him, was I unfair to you? He says, yeah, I only asked a question and you said I'm going to stay behind. And I said, even though I knew what was going to happen, obviously Allah knows the ghaib,
of course.
But even though I knew what was going to happen, if people just enter into the hellfire on Allah's knowledge, then they will complain and say,
Yes.
oh
We didn't do
Allah, I
anything.
didn't do anything.
Yes.
So it's like, obviously we testify against ourselves on the day of judgment. It's not. It's gone. Allah.
Right.
We got our bodies will testify against us. You know.
Yeah.
So it just brought that story
Yeah,
back to mind.
subhanAllah,
That even though it's all written, we still need to put the action in, or else there will be no point in.
A hujjah against you.
It's a hujjah against us, you know. And
Right.
and again, just look at the lives of the prophets and the righteous people, and they done it as well.
No.
No, it does. So obviously we're lesser. we need to make it obviously.
Absolutely, Jazakallah khair. That's actually a very good point. Yeah, that's a beautiful topic about qadar and how to deal with qadar, and how, although it was written for us, we're still required to put into action. We're still required to do something. And so even the people of Jannah and the people of the hellfire, yes, it was written that they chose to do this or chose to do that, but they cannot say, like, we're just going to be thrown in the hellfire, we didn't do anything wrong. They cannot say that because they testify against themselves. So maybe we can move on to a story perhaps, because there was a sister that was diagnosed with cancer, and a few years ago she was diagnosed with cancer, and she started making very sincere dua. Very, very sincere dua. And they said it's like a very late stage in the cancer. They detected it very late, so that it's fatal now. And subhanAllah, she went to Umrah, she made some dua, she traveled somewhere else. She was making dua throughout her traveling. She was very sincere. When she came back, she went for another, the continuous checkup. And the doctors, they looked at the report, they said, the cancer is gone. It just disappeared. They told her, did you go and get alternative treatment, like somewhere in the Middle East, like when you went for Umrah? She said, no. I just made a lot of dua and I drank Zamzam water. And they didn't understand. They're like, well, how did it just go away? And this is from the dua. The dua can cure. The dua is a cure for everything. Dua is literally a cure for everything. And one of the scholars that passed, I believe, is Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah or Imam Nawawi. They used to talk about this in depth and how this is something that's a cure. It cures you from all the problems that you have. Any hardship you come into or encounter in your life, you can solve it with dua. You can solve it with dua. So maybe we can move on to something that's very important to remember. Maybe our listeners can benefit from this. It's some of the preconditions of dua. The preconditions of dua. And so when we have preconditions, we have to remember maybe the fact that only Allah can respond to the dua. Only Allah can alleviate this problem. Even if people wanted to help you and Allah did not decree for you to be helped, you would not be helped. And if nobody wanted to help you, but Allah wanted you to be helped, then you would be helped. So Allah facilitates everything for us. When we make dua, we have to always remember that the sincerity in the dua has to be to Allah alone. And one thing, maybe you can comment on this, Ustad Muhammad, is how some people, they make dua, but they're very hasty. Like they give up very quickly. So can you comment on this?
First of all, the best thing about dua is that it's endless, It doesn't finish. You can keep doing dua until you die, and on the same thing,
Yeah.
Even, if I make dua, for instance, I want 1,000 janays, and I get it, I can still make dua on the same thing.
Yes.
It's not that I did it, that's it, I can't do it anymore,
Right.
And there's no specific time or, like you said, dua is not like salat. Salat al-Asr, for instance, is 4 rak'ahs, right? Dua, it doesn't say that dua, you have to do it, once a day or twice. You can do it infinite times a day.
And in any way you want, yeah.
Exactly.
As long as it's halal, you can do it any way you want, anywhere you want, anytime.
And it's like the endless type of worship,
Yes.
You can do it all day, all night, whenever you want.
Jazakallah khairan. And so with this point, this is beautiful, that you can make dua anytime. You should never give up. You should intend, basically, you're going to always be making dua. It's part of our way of life. It's part of submitting to the Creator. That's essentially what we're here for.
You never know, maybe if people are hasty, maybe this is a trial from Allah. He wants to see how long
Yes.
you'll keep going
No.
for Him to accept your dua,
Yes.
inshallah.
So our viewers, stay tuned, because at the end of this episode, inshallah ta'ala, we're actually going to be talking about why is the dua delayed, what is the wisdom behind it in some circumstances. With this point right here, we want to mention that it's a precondition to your dua being accepted. So not to be hasty. The Prophet ﷺ told us, as was reported by Imam Muslim, that a person will be making dua and then he'll give up because he didn't see the answer. And then he'll say, my dua was not answered. My dua was not answered. The Prophet ﷺ said, as long as you're not hasty, your dua will be answered. As long as you're not impatient. Because with dua, you have to be patient. I want us to think and reflect on this one point. That you and I can be making dua for something for so long, and you really want it, you're so sincere. And if you had given up at this point, it might have been that your dua was accepted at this point right here. So if you had just stayed patient for a little longer, then you would have got the dua that you asked for. So always be patient with dua. Don't be hasty with dua. Now, what about making dua for things that are good? Shaykh Idris? Making dua for the things that are good for us. Are we allowed to make dua for things that are not good for us, for example?
No. Don't make dua for things that are bad for you, or don't make dua to like harm your family
Right.
or these type of evil things. Don't make this dua.
Then it was
Because it may be answered, and
Yes.
this is a terrible thing.
So the Prophet ﷺ actually told us, don't make dua against yourselves or against your family members or your children or your wealth or your servants. Don't make dua, because if you make this type of angry dua at them, you might have made that dua at a time of acceptance, and Allah might accept it. And so we're just reminding our beloved viewers, don't make dua against your family members, your children, your parents, things like that. This dua is not a good dua. You want to make dua for good things. Another precondition of dua is that your heart has to be attentive, focused, as was reported by Imam al-Tirmidhi. That Allah accepts from the heart that is attentive, not the heart that is careless or heedless. And so maybe, sometimes we make a dua so much, it becomes just like a normal thing, a routine. So somebody will go into sujood, they'll make the dua, they go up, and then you ask them, what did you make dua for? They don't even remember anymore, because they've been making it for so long. So Shaykh Ilyas, what's something we can add to this? For somebody who has a problem with, they're not focused on the dua, how can they put their heart into it?
Yeah, what I find, because we all have that problem sometimes,
Yeah.
Salah becomes autopilot.
Yes.
So what I find is that, for me, myself, is that changing the du'as that we make. If we learn that one du'a and we become really, good at doing it, if you like, if we're learning it in Arabic isn't our first language, and when you start making that du'a and you know what it means, then learn another one. And when you know what it means, you might go back to the first one. So it's kind of just keeping our ibadah alive.
SubhanAllah.
Giving
That's
it
perfect.
life. I find that's very important.
Yeah.
Because even some of the dua we make after tashahhud, there's various narrations. Sometimes we just learn one, and then that's it for the rest of our lives. But when we learn more than one, then inshallah, it's great for our ibadah.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair. And so on that point, with having our hearts being attentive, we basically have to remember, if you're not being attentive with your dua, it's likely the dua will not be answered, or it'll be a very weak dua. So put your heart into the dua, believe that the dua will be accepted, and if you feel like you're not concentrating on a dua, maybe change the wording up, maybe change the way you're saying it. Some people say, oh Allah, grant me al-firdaus al-a'la. Somebody else will change it up because they got it repetitive, so they'll say, oh Allah, grant me companionship with the Prophet in Jannah. So now they're focused on it in a different way. So try to change the way you make the dua. These are some of the preconditions of dua, and we have many others. The only other one that we want to list for this episode, for the sake of time, is to make sure that your sustenance, your provisions are pure, that your rizq is halal, you're not buying or getting your money from interest or alcohol or selling something forbidden, because your rizq does affect your body and it affects your dua. And the example is a man who's making dua, but he's eating he's consuming that which is haram. He's drinking that which is unlawful because of his wealth, and his clothes were bought with this haram money, and now he's making dua and he's wondering why it's not being accepted. But he's consuming everything that Allah forbade. And so we remind ourselves, make sure what you're consuming is tayyib, it's pure, because Allah loves that which is pure. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who are very attentive and concentrating when they're making their dua, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us, innaka anta as-sami'ul alim. We're going to take a short break inshallah ta'ala, and we'll be right back after this short break.
We welcome you, month we all adore. We pray for happiness and more.
Ramadan in Somalia. Somali Muslims have been practicing Islam for over 1,400 years. The entire Somalian population is 10 million approximately, even though formal statistics have not been predicted to confirm this figure. Somalia is considered one of the countries around the world with 100% Muslim population. Ramadan is highly reverent in Somalia, as it is the month in which Allah grants every believing Muslim great blessings and forgiveness. Somalis warmly embrace each other in celebrating the beginning of the holy month of Ramadan. Somalis usually spend time in the last nights of the month of Sha'ban looking into the sky in search for the crescent of Ramadan. When the crescent is seen, the competent authorities responsible for Islamic affairs are informed. They, in turn, make announcement to the general public on the media. The commencement of Ramadan depends on seeing the moon in a particular region of Somalia, while the vast majority of Muslims across Somalia follow the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in all Islamic practices, including the holy month of Ramadan. Somali Muslims preserve the practice of eating the pre-dawn meal in Ramadan. The most common varieties of food in this meal throughout the month of Ramadan are pasta, rice, and haris. Breakfast meals include dates, milk, lemon drink, sweets, rice, and meat. The breakfast is eaten after Maghrib prayer. After eating the breakfast, everyone goes to the mosque to join the congregation in the night prayer. Many mosques in Somalia perform 20 units of prayer known in Arabic language as rak'at. During the prayer, the imams include supplications after every few rak'at. A portion of the glorious Quran is read in every night prayer of Ramadan, and by the 27th night of this blessed month, the whole portions of the glorious Quran are read. Many mosques in Somalia offer lectures and seminars after the night prayer during this month. The observation of the night of power, known as Laylatul Qadr, is highly preserved in Somalia. Mosques in all towns and villages in Somalia are filled with devoted worshippers in this night. They perform prayers, supplications, and they recite the glorious Quran throughout the night. Even though Somalia is going through difficult times, the Muslim brothers and sisters of this noble country continue to hold on to their religion and preserve its practices. Wealthy Somalis concentrate part of their wealth in providing the poor and needy daily meals during the month of Ramadan. May Allah bring together the hearts of our brothers and sisters in the Republic of Somalia to ensure peace and tranquility on the Somali soil.
We welcome you, month we all adore. We pray for happiness and more.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back from the break. We were discussing some of the preconditions for dua, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you and I in this blessed month of Ramadan. Now, one question that comes up often, as a trivia question maybe, and this is not really trivial, so we should probably say as an Islamic question, is what is the most dua that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to make, according to one of the companions? Sheikh Idris?
I believe it was the Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana. What's the rest of the dua?
Yeah, that's the dua. So, Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana.
201.
Yeah, ayah 201 from Surah Al-Baqarah. Jazakallah khairan. So this dua is very powerful and very concise. Oh Allah, grant us good in this life, and good in the next life, and protect us from the punishment of the hellfire. This dua is so concise because the scholar said it covers everything you need. Good in this life means all types of good, and all types of protection from evil. So you're already making dua for everything in this dua. And you're also making dua for protection on the most important day of existence, the hereafter, and protection from the hellfire, meaning you're guaranteed Jannah if you make that dua and it's accepted. So this dua is very beautiful and very powerful. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. So what are some of the things we can talk about in regards to the dua, the etiquettes of dua? Because there are many etiquettes of dua. So maybe, Sheikh Abdullah, what is the first thing that it's an etiquette of dua more likely to be accepted if we start with it? You start your dua with this one or two things, your dua is more likely to be accepted.
I forgot actually.
Calling Allah upon
So
His
is it
name
maybe praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Praising Allah, so yeah, for sure. Like praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and praising the Prophet based upon him. And then like being sincere, if you can do wudu, facing the Qibla.
So you're covering all of them, mashallah.
I remember
Now you remembered all of them,
everything.
So we start with hamd,
Yeah.
praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and salah upon the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, there was once a sahabi who was doing this. He was praying after salah, started making dua. But he didn't do this. He didn't make hamd and he didn't do salah upon the Prophet. The Prophet ﷺ said he's been hasty, he's been very impatient. He told them, start with praising Allah first as He deserves to be praised. So you start by praising Allah. This shows that you're grateful, that you're humble. You start by praising the Prophet ﷺ, the one who brought you this message. And so by doing this, your dua now is not covered anymore. So there's a hadith that says your dua is covered except the one that starts with salah upon the Prophet. Meaning now it's revealed, it's direct communication. Now somebody will ask, does this mean every type of dua I have to make, I have to start with hamd and salah? Do they? No. So this is just for the dua that you're making stand alone by itself. This is not the dua that you're making like for entering the house, leaving the house, entering the bathroom, entering the masjid, and so on and so forth. These are adhkar that are specific. This is for the dua where you want to just start making dua by itself, outside of salah. In salah, you don't have to do this, as the scholar said, like in sujood. So this dua is specifically, by itself, or in Salatul Witr, when you're standing to make the qunut, you can do this as well. So start by praising Allah, and show your praise, really mention everything. Ya Allah, thank you so much for this, thank you for that, thank you for this, thank you for everything. Start expressing your gratitude to Allah, and this will increase the likelihood of your dua being accepted. Now, one other thing that you mentioned is to have wudu.
Yes.
So being in a state of purity, the Prophet ﷺ used to make wudu. In many examples, many ahadith, he would make wudu before he would start to make dua. What about facing the qibla? Is this also one of the etiquettes of dua?
Yeah.
It is. Do we know what example in which the Prophet ﷺ did this?
No.
So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu one time went to him and he complained that his mother, she was cursing the Prophet. She wasn't a believer at the time. So he said, please make dua for my mother to believe. So the Prophet ﷺ was sitting down, he stood up, he made wudu, and then he faced the qibla. So he faced the qibla, as was mentioned in this hadith, and many other hadith as well. Now, this is the next part, which is facing the qibla. You realize that it's like something of salah. But the dua doesn't require it. It's not mandatory. So again, we remind everyone that these are etiquettes of dua. They're not required. It's possible that your dua is accepted without doing these things. But these things increase the likelihood of your dua being accepted, because this is the way the Prophet ﷺ did it. And this brings us to the next point. In that same incident of Abu Hurairah, the Prophet ﷺ lifted up his hands. So raising our hands in dua. Now, when is it sunnah to raise our hands for dua? When is it best not to raise our hands for dua? Shaykh Ilyas?
In the sunnah, from what I know, when you're making dua, obviously things like qunut, in our salah, it's highly recommended to making dua. Also, if we are...
Only in qunut in salah, right?
In qunut.
Yes, just making sure.
No, the qunut in the salah. Also, when we maybe making dua, asking for rain.
Yes.
It's also recommended to raise our hands. And it was narrated that the Prophet ﷺ, and he would sometimes raise his hands for salah so high you could see like the whiteness of his armpits. Also, in times of distress, when we make dua, if we want something, or in a time of difficulty, then it's also recommended that we raise our hands. So they said, like, one of the hikmah of raising our hands is that it's like you want that blessing to fall into your hand. Yes. It's like you want that. It's like you're asking, and inshallah the blessings will descend in between your hands.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khairan. And so Imam Ahmad and Imam Tirmidhi reported the Prophet ﷺ said that indeed Allah is shy and generous. Shy and generous from his slave. He is shy when his servant raises his hands to make dua to him. He doesn't want to return them empty. He doesn't want them to leave with nothing, disappointed, basically, in their dua. So raising our hands for dua, all the scholars, they've said this in the beginning, from the tabi'in and the sahaba and so on, they said this means up to the shoulder level at least. This is when you're making general dua for almost everything. So when you're making dua, you raise your hands up to at least your shoulder level. And when it's a very dire situation, an urgent situation, a calamity and so on and so forth, you're really into the dua, they said you can raise your hands all the way up, as the Prophet ﷺ did. And in the case when you raise them all the way up, they don't have to be connected together, as is the case when they are lowered. And so making the dua, it's a form of humility that your hands are out and you're showing that you have nothing, you're empty. You're humbling yourself to Allah, Allah, please give me. And so some of the scholars said it's best to make dua with your hands, with your palms towards the earth, and with your palms towards Allah, the sky, and the back of your hand towards the earth, and that it's a sign of arrogance to have your hands like this, where you're showing the back of your hand towards the heavens. And so this is a sign of humility. Some people will say it's okay to have your hands facing you as well, but most scholars say it's best to have your hands outwards. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Ultimately, we want to make dua and humble ourselves. It's a form of humility. Another etiquette of dua is to try to cry, to try to really cry. Now, what if we cannot cry in the dua? What should we try to do, Shaykh Idris?
If you can't cry, I'm not sure. I mean, if, at the very minimum, like we said earlier, you should have at least a connection to the dua. But if you can't cry, try to make yourself cry.
Yes.
Like Omar radiallahu anhu, he saw that they were crying. He didn't even know why they were crying. But he said, if they're crying, I want to cry also. Yeah. So he made himself cry.
No. So if you are crying in the dua, means it's something you really want. Some people, when they're going through very, very severe situations, they will start to cry because they really want it. And this shows how much they want it, how broken they are in front of the Lord of the worlds. And if you cannot cry, at least try to cry. Try to put your heart into it. Try to at least be as sincere as possible, because when you try to cry while you're making dua, it'll also try to make you concentrate more on the dua.
Actually, there is like a dua for those who like kind of cannot cry, or those who kind of have like a heart, like kind of a heart, or like ربنا تأخذنا أو يعني there's a dua when you like kind of make, if your heart is really strong and really like hard, it's not that soft and like kind of.
اللهم إنا نعوذ من قلب لا يخشع
قلب
ومن
لا
عين
يخشع.
لا تدمع.
نعم.
Yes.
نعم. Like,
So
you know,
we
this
seek
dua.
refuge in you from a heart that is not like sincere or moved, and from an eye that does not
Some
tear
people
up.
don't move, like, you know, so don't move at all. They don't get emotion. And as you said, like, you see, have this state of like kind of connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you pray sincerely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it comes from your heart. And for sure, it's going to be touched. It's like, when we're going to be touched, I'm going to cry. There's like kind of something, I mean, like human.
But you know, just on that point, if a person does have like a hard heart and he find that he doesn't cry, I mean, he shouldn't, you know, despair because of it.
Oh, of course.
You know, because some people say, no, I can't cry. Lord. You know, it's like, oh man, I'm not going to cry. It's not a sign of manhood that you don't cry.
Of course.
You know, it was mentioned that Abu Bakr had 2 lines down his face because of the amount of crying that he would do.
Couldn't even finish Al-Fatiha.
He couldn't even finish Al-Fatiha. So crying is actually a sign of, it's a sign of iman. You know, it's not a sign of, you know, femininity or anything of that nature.
Unfortunately, in our times, that's how it's represented, that a man does not cry, and it's a person who cries a lot is weak.
No.
Whereas the reality is, you look at the Sahaba, the best of the Sahaba, they used to cry often.
No.
Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu
Because they
anhu.
knew Allah.
And
When
you
you
know
know Allah and you know the
Your heart is
reality of who
soft.
Allah is,
SubhanAllah.
you'll be soft.
No.
Subhanallah.
And it gives the example in the Quran about like a rock.
Yes.
And a rock in which like springs,
Yes.
they burst forth. So
تفجر منه الأنهار.
exactly, so it's, you know, it's a sign that, you know, that our hearts can, even if it's hard, it can be softened.
Subhanallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala soften our hearts. One of the ways to soften our hearts in this month, and we will discuss this in a future episode inshallah, is to go and help the poor and the orphans and the needy, and to actually deal with them one-on-one. Because when we go to their situation, we see what they're going through, it'll soften our hearts. Especially the orphan, patting even the head of the orphan, as was mentioned in the hadith. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all that. Another etiquette of dua, while you're making dua, is to expect the best from Allah, to assume the best of Him. And so Allah tells us, I am as my servant assumes of me. I will come to you as you assume of me. If you assume good of Allah, Allah will answer your dua. Allah will answer your dua. Another etiquette of dua is to make it quietly. Why is this an etiquette of dua? Shaykh Abdullah?
I mean, if you're asking someone, you should ask him like in a very polite way, in a very kind of humble and polite way. And if I'm asking like someone, a human like me, I cannot ask him to give me something when I'm shouting at him, yelling at him. And at the same time, it should be kind of a sign of like humility,
Yes.
like kind of being simple, not kind of showing off and stuff like this.
And sometimes I think that most of the good deeds that we do should be secret, you know, just between you and Allah. So
exactly.
you don't want anyone to know what you're asking from Allah, you know.
No. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah actually listed many different benefits on just this point of making dua quietly. Not quietly as in you cannot hear yourself at all, but as in quietly as in not in a loud voice. Especially when there are many people around you or people can hear you and so on and so forth. It's best to keep yourself as quiet as possible between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To repeat the dua as much as possible. You know, 3 times is the sunnah, as was mentioned in one of the ahadith. And to make the dua at all times. So whether you're in a good time or in a bad time, you make a lot of dua. Because the Prophet ﷺ told us, remember Allah in times of ease, and Allah will remember you
In times of hardship.
in times of hardship. And so while you're going through ease, make more dua, so that when you're going through hardship, the Prophet ﷺ actually said in one narration reported by Tirmidhi, is that Allah will accept your dua in times of hardship. So Allah will make it easier for you when you make dua in a difficulty to answer your dua. Because you made more dua to Him when you were comfortable, when you were relaxed and everything was going well. And the last thing we want to add to this point of etiquette is to ask for everything. To ask for everything. Small or big, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the dunya or for the akhirah. Ask Allah, it shows that you want Allah and you need Allah and you depend on Him. It shows humility. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us acceptance for our dua and to grant us humility throughout our lives. We're going to take a short break inshallah ta'ala and we'll be right back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
We welcome you, month we all adore. We pray for happiness and more.
The dua, as you said, the dua is also the thing that Allah makes you as a person close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more you make dua, you will come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more you make dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept your dua if you do the conditions that you're supposed to do when you're making the dua. For example, if you eat haram and you make dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not accept. So there's a big relation with the hadith you mentioned and the dua.
The best time to make dua is when you are in sujood. That's when you ask Allah and make dua, and Allah will accept your dua. And the time of raining, when it's raining, if you ask Allah for something, Allah will give it to you. And also there's an hour in the Friday prayer, the last hour, and if you make dua, inshallah, Allah will accept also. And there's many more.
There's so many times that is best to make dua. One of the times to make dua is after midnight, when normally when people are praying Qiyamul, all of the other people are praying, and most of the people are sleeping, and you pray. Also, there's a few times, such as between the time of Asr and Maghrib in the Friday.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back from the Vox Pop, a reminder about making dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us and to accept our dua in this blessed month and onwards as well. So we want to move on now as we start to wrap up this beautiful topic. We want to talk about times in which dua is likelier to be accepted, because we know there's certain times in which dua is more likely to be responded to by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So perhaps we can start over here on the right, and maybe we can go in a circle. We can mention some of the times in which dua is likelier to be accepted. Tafadhal.
The Prophet ﷺ told us that the time when we are closest to Allah is when we're in sujood, so we should increase in our dua whilst we're in sujood. So one of the best times was whilst we're actually submitting to Allah in sujood. That's one of the best times to make dua, inshallah.
فَأَكْثِرُ السُّجُود. So in the time of prostration, to increase our dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tafadhal.
As we know from the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the last third of the night comes down to see who's calling of him, who wants of him, and this is a wonderful time that He will answer your dua.
Absolutely.
Inshallah.
So in the last third of the night, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends and asks, who will ask me so that I will give them, who will make dua so that I will respond to them, who will seek forgiveness so that I will forgive them. Jazakumullahu khairan. So make dua in the last third of the night. Tafadhal, Ustad Muhammad.
Between adhan and iqamah, Rasulullah ﷺ said a supplication made between adhan and iqamah isn't rejected. So you have a small 5-minute gap, or 10-minute, maybe 15 between some salahs.
Now the beautiful thing about that is that some people, subhanAllah, in the masjid, they're just wasting time at that time. Like they're talking, they're gossiping, socializing, or they're on their phones texting. Generally speaking, this is one of the best times we can make dua. A lot of people's dua is accepted between the adhan and the iqamah. And it's also encouraged to be able to know when the adhan and the iqamah is, which indicates that it's best to be in the situation where you're going to be praying with a jama'ah. So this will help us pray more in jama'ah. Tafadhal.
I would say, especially in the month of dua, Ramadan, these days.
The easiest one.
Yes, we got it's guaranteed, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll be accepted. Actually, I heard that Sahaba were waiting in Ramadan, and making special dua in Ramadan, and mashallah, it was accepted before the next Ramadan comes. So I heard this.
That's
and
beautiful.
Really, it's made dua the most of Ramadan, the month of dua.
So increase our dua in the month of Ramadan.
And it will be accepted, inshallah, before the next one comes.
Inshallah. So we have a lot of times in which we can make dua. We know that the last third of the night, we know that there's a special hour on Friday. Most of the scholars say, based on the hadith, that it's the last part after Asr, before Maghrib. To make dua during this time, it's accepted. We know that between the two khutbahs of the Jumu'ah, it's accepted. Between the two khutbahs, meaning when the Imam sits for those few moments, to make as much dua as possible. Until the end of the salah, the dua is accepted. We know that the dua is accepted after salah, dubur. Now this word dubur, some scholars said at the end of the salah, so right before you say the salam. Some of them said it's right after the salah. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah and Imam Nawawi say both are okay. To make dua after salah or at the end of the salah. We have so many opportunities to make dua, people don't really take advantage of them. And we even know that if you're sleeping and you wake up in the middle of the night, for any reason whatsoever, you just woke up, and you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's even a specific dhikr that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, he said whoever makes dua at that time, the dua is accepted. And if he stood up and made wudu and prayed 2 rakahs, the salah will automatically be accepted. This is like a guarantee.
Just quickly, we all wake up for suhoor. That's the last third of the night, and we need, and it's a month of Ramadan as well.
Right.
So I think that's a good thing to remember.
That's a very good reminder.
Unfortunately, people be spending this time
Yes.
You know, we don't want to say everything.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, especially in Egypt. I was speaking about, like, you know, in Egypt, like, we waste it, like, so badly. Like, you know, in the
I think
coffee
it's
I
shop.
everywhere.
don't think it's
Subhanallah.
Egypt, to be fair.
Yeah, subhanallah.
I don't think it's Egypt.
And so the reminder was, during the last moments, a lot of people are eating suhoor. Some people stay up all night in Ramadan. Their sleep is switched, which is, it's okay. But you're staying up and you're going to be awake at that time to eat. You might as well make some dua, some sincere, hardcore dua. You know it's going to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this blessed month. There are many other times as well. But let us move forward now to the conditions in which, if you're in this condition, your dua is also likely to be accepted. For example, we have the oppressed person, the one who is madloom. This guy makes dua, this person makes dua because they are oppressed. And our brothers and sisters around the world are oppressed right now. We need to make dua for them, and their dua is even likely to be accepted. We also know that the one who's traveling, their dua is accepted. The one who's fasting in the month of Ramadan and afterwards, your dua is accepted while you're fasting. Make as much dua throughout the day and night. And even at night, at the moment of breaking our fast, we know there's one hadith that says at the time of breaking fast. So both of these are times to make dua. We know that the parent for their child, their dua is accepted. We know the children for their parents, when they pass away, their dua is accepted. So there's so many conditions which we make, when it rains is the time to make dua. It's a sign of mercy as well. So there's all these conditions and times. We highly encourage our brothers and sisters who are watching and listening to make as much dua as possible throughout the day and night, especially these bonus moments when the dua is likelier to be accepted. Now, what about non-Muslims? Don't some of them, they go through hardships, don't they start to turn to Allah even if they don't believe in God?
Yeah.
And this is very common. And this is even mentioned in the Quran, وَإِذَا مَسَّ الْإِنسَانَ Insan, not just the believer, the human being, when they're afflicted with calamity. They turn to Allah, they make dua. When it's given to them, they're helped, then they turn away as if nothing had happened before. As if nothing had happened before. I once worked with an atheist pharmacist. He was atheist, he used to actually make fun of religion. And he used to make fun of Islam too. And I used to talk to him about Islam, try to respond to his statements. And then one time I thought of asking him this question. I said, you know what? Do you ever, ask God for anything? Did you ever? And so he answered, I only did once when I was in a very bad situation. And you know what? This is a really interesting story. But we're told that we have a caller on the line. So we're going to take a call, inshallah ta'ala. And then we will continue the story. Our caller from around the world, tfaddal. Brother Hani. From the United States. تفضل.
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
كيف الحال شيخ سليمان? How are you?
Alhamdulillah, how are you, Sheikh Hani?
ما شاء الله, ما شاء الله. May Allah bless you, bless the brothers with you in the studio, the brothers who are in charge of Huda TV.
Ameen. And you as well.
Yeah, just I would like to remind the brothers everywhere, especially in this month, to make dua, a lot of dua for our Muslim ummah, especially in Palestine, in Syria, in Egypt, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Libya, in Burma, everywhere. They need our dua, so we need to remind ourselves, especially in this month, to make a special dua for them, inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan for the reminder. Barakallahu feek.
And we have good news for you, Sheikh Suleiman. Allah accepted your dua. Inshallah, this year we'll go to Hajj.
Inshallah, Jazakumullah khairan.
Yalla, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu feekum. And so as we start wrapping up this episode, subhanAllah, that's actually a familiar person. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him and protect him and his family. We have the story of the atheist. He said, I don't believe in Islam, I don't believe in God. So I asked him, have you ever made prayers? Have you ever supplicated to God? He said, I did once, just once. I said, when? He said, I came to America from India. I came to America and I had nothing, no money. Everyone in my village was depending on me to succeed. You have to become a pharmacist, you have to make money and send some back to your family. So he said, I got to a point where I was studying morning and night, I could not handle it. It was so difficult, so severe, I almost committed suicide. I said, what do you do? He said, in the middle of the night, I just woke up and I just started saying, oh God, if you're out there, please help me in my situation, please make me successful. And I said, now what? He said, yeah, now I'm very successful. I'm like, God answered your prayer. He's like, yeah, I don't know, I think I just studied hard. And I'm like, man, you are so close-minded. Because God accepted it right in front of you. Maybe it took some time, but now, he was one of the most wealthy pharmacists in the entire state. That's how well he was doing. And so God accepts our prayers. But sometimes people forget. And so we remind ourselves when you are going through a hardship, remember all the times that you made dua and Allah accepted it. We oftentimes forget about
It's
that.
like Qarun, isn't it?
Yes, subhanAllah, it's like Qarun. He had this arrogance. And so let us summarize by saying, my dua is delayed. Some people say my dua is delayed, so how should I feel about that? We should remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wise. He knows that if He gives you something now, it might not be better for you than if He gave it to you later. He also knows if it'll harm you. Somebody might make dua for something that will harm them, but they don't know. وَعَسَى أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَعَسَى أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. You might
Like money, for
love
instance.
something. Yes.
Wealth.
Like wealth, that's a very common and very popular example. And so we have all of these examples in which people don't realize that their dua, there's a wisdom behind when Allah is answering it. Some people, imagine this, some people, if they made dua and it was answered right away every time, they'll become arrogant. They'll say, yeah, all I got to do is make dua, I'm a good person, I'm righteous, and they'll start to kind of feel prideful. They don't feel like they need Allah anymore because they got what they wanted very quickly. Whereas sometimes the more dua you make, it perfects your worship, your tawheed, your iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Plus we said, Allah knows everything. We don't know the ghaib. So when we make a dua and we don't think it's being accepted, maybe an evil that was on its way to us has been averted, but we don't know. So that's just something else to bear in mind.
And so we have all of these types of wisdoms behind it. There's many things that we can talk about for many hours, subhanAllah. So the dua, ultimately we make dua, we trust in Allah's wisdom. This goes back to our topic of tawakkul. We trust that Allah knows what is best for us, and when we make dua, we put our hearts into it. Oh Allah, help the believing men and women around the world. Oh Allah, forgive the Muslims, those who are alive and those who have passed away. We make dua while we're in a state of purity and khushu' and humility. We make dua after we repent sincerely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we highly encourage our dear brothers and sisters, just as 2 simple action items or 3, inshallah ta'ala, is in this blessed month and onwards, inshallah, focus on your dua, especially a core few duas that you really, really, really want. And we make dua for everything. But focus on a few that you will make in every salah, at every opportunity between adhan and iqamah in the last third of the night. You make dua consistently and constantly, and you believe that it's answered. So believe that Allah accepted your dua, and do as much as possible to start acting upon the belief that this dua was accepted. And the second action item, as our Shaykh Hani reminded us, he told us, make sure that you're praying for the Muslims around the world, especially in the month of Ramadan. Our brothers and sisters are literally suffering everywhere. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most gracious, the most merciful, the one who helps those who need Him in this time. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our brothers and sisters, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant them relief wherever they are. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us in this blessed month. Jazakumullah khairan to all of our guests. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you for your time. Please make dua for everyone that you can see and everyone that you don't see that's behind the scenes, and everyone who's benefiting from this, inshaAllah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khaira. We will see you in a future episode, inshaAllah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.